Welcome in to CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. Right off the top, the work to dismantle the Department of Education. President Trump will start that process just hours from now with the first signing of his executive order to abolish the department completely. It's tricky, though. Closing that department completely would require an act of Congress, specifically 60 votes in the Senate. Now, remember, Republicans only have a 53 to 47 seat advantage. That means they would need 7 Democrats to get this passed. And if every single Republican senator is on board with this. So let's take a closer look at where the money from the DOE goes. They spend billions to fund high poverty K-12 schools, $15.5 billion to teach kids with disabilities, and $1.6 trillion for federal student loan programs. Now, the criticism of this order already pouring in. Here's how the White House is responding to it. Let's listen in.
Caroline, what do you say to critics of the president's education plan?
Where was their criticism of our nation's failing test scores for the last several decades? The Department of Education was founded in the 1970s, and since then we have spent more than $3 trillion at this federal bureaucracy. What has been the return on that investment for the American taxpayer? Levels that are less than ideal, less than proficient. Our children's test scores are incredibly concerning when it comes to reading rates, literacy rates, math, and science test scores. The numbers prove that, and this president is finally taking much needed action to return education to where it belongs, and that's to educators closest to students in their classrooms in their respective states. We're going to have a great event here later at 4 o'clock. There will be students here, teachers here, parents here, educators, and of course governors from around the country who are very excited about taking on this responsibility to educate our nation's students.
All right, let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman live for us today. Willie, what else is the White House saying about this?
Hey there, Liz. Well, the messaging from the White House is that critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs should not be part of the curriculum for schools around the country. I'll point out that for the most part, critical race theory, things such as that, are not necessarily taught at K-12 schools. Teachers will tell you that. Departments of education across the country will tell you that as well. But this president has telegraphed time and time again that he wants to dismantle and get rid of the Department of Education, and signing this executive order, that is the first step to do so, to essentially downsize the Department of Education, which is notably one of the smaller agencies in terms of all of those government departments across Washington, D.C. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the funding that you outlined there for programs that support young children, that support students with disabilities, or student loan programs, that doesn't go away. The Department of Education will still handle those programs, but there could potentially be some downsizing. We've already seen half of the workforce at the Department of Education eliminated, essentially fired. So perhaps there could be some work done there, but still, nonetheless, the president going forward with this executive order. But as you pointed out perfectly, he will need Congress to be able to completely get rid of the Department of Education, Liz.
Yeah, there's been a lot of response to this, Willie. The American Federation of Teachers had a message for the president: see you in court. So what's their argument?
Yeah, it was a pretty short statement coming from Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, essentially pointing out polling that says that Americans simply don't want this, but also pointing out that this is a move that most people in America they don't want it, but it will diminish opportunities for students across the country. The White House says, on the other hand, that those programs will still be in place at the Department of Education, and eventually the goal is to move things such as student loans to the Department of Treasury, for instance, and to spread out those programs that the Department of Education handled to other agencies within the federal government. But lots of criticism coming from the teachers union, one of the largest teachers union that represents millions of teachers across the country in those K-12 schools, and likely some legal challenges once the president signs this executive order to come down the pipeline. Liz?
All right, CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. Thank you so much, Willie. Always great to see you. All right, meanwhile, Columbia University is facing an end-of-day deadline that could cost them $400 million in federal funding. That order comes from the Trump administration. And here's a list of their demands. Enforce a mask ban on campus, reform undergraduate admissions, and institute a third-party review of Middle East, South Asian, and African studies curriculum. Now, the university president is already signaling that she's going to comply to this. And universities around the country are keeping a close eye on that, including the University of California, who says due to federal funding uncertainty, they will be implementing a hiring freeze across 10 different campus systems. Well, at this hour, a legal showdown is unfolding between the Department of Justice and a Washington, D.C. judge. Judge James Boasberg has demanded the department reveal details about 2 deportation flights involving alleged Venezuelan immigrants. Now, last week, more than 200 migrants in the U.S. were flown to El Salvador after that country's president agreed to accept them. They're now being held in prison there. And Attorney General Pam Bondi says the government may invoke state secrets privilege to block Judge Boasberg's order. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had this to say earlier today.
The judge in this case is essentially trying to say that the president doesn't have the executive authority to deport foreign terrorists from our American soil. That is an egregious abuse of the bench. This judge does not have that authority. It is the opinion of this White House and of this administration, and that's why we're fighting this in court. And it's very, very clear that this is an activist judge who is trying to usurp the president's authority.
CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen joins us now from Washington. Jake, that noon Eastern time deadline has gone and passed. Any word on the administration's response, if any?
We have not seen any new information hit the docket yet, although it's likely that this was potentially just sent to Judge Boasberg, if it was sent at all. I'm sure there'll be more to come in the next couple of minutes, but just the scene set, really what we've seen, this kind of ping-pong battle over the last couple of days between people like Caroline Leavitt, Elon Musk, and President Trump, accusing Judge Boasberg of being a, quote, activist judge. Elon Musk and allies have called to impeach him, including President Trump, which means a Senate hearing and Senate votes to remove him from his position. This is all because on Saturday, Judge Boasberg blocked the deportation of these alleged Tren de Aragua gang members to El Salvador. The Salvadoran government accepted them, and all the footage that you're seeing now was basically staged media which caught these flights as they landed. The judge just simply wants to know, in this whole standoff, more details and operational details on the flight. The Department of Justice is saying the judge really has no right to ask for any of that, in addition to that basically being moot, because there will be an appeals hearing on Monday in front of a 3-panel judge here in Washington, D.C., which will hear, again, a higher court argument to hear arguments from both sides as to why this block, for now, should be struck down.
And Jake, I want to ask you about a developing story out of Georgetown University. A researcher detained by immigration authorities on March 17th. Now, CBS News learned his name is Badar Khan Suri. He is an Indian national, a postdoctoral candidate teaching at the university on a student visa. Now, the Department of Homeland Security confirmed Suri's visa was canceled for what they call foreign policy reasons. The agency posted on X saying, quote, Suri was a foreign exchange student at Georgetown University, actively spreading Hamas propaganda and promoting anti-Semitism on social media. Now, Georgetown released a statement on the detention saying in part, quote, we are not aware of him engaging in any illegal activity, and we have not received a reason for his detention. We expect the legal system to adjudicate this case fairly. Now, CBS News has some reporting on this. Jake, what have you learned?
That's right. This morning I went to a federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia, just down the road from here, where we obtained the initial complaint by Mr. Khan Suri's attorneys, who argued that A, he has not been charged with anything, nor are there allegations. He has been moved from Virginia to Louisiana, where he's being held now, and his attorneys said that they fear he could potentially be sent to a migrant detention center near the U.S.-Mexico border, where then he would likely be deported from back to India. His wife is a U.S. citizen who is here. The government government alleges that potentially family members of hers were affiliated or have been affiliated with Hamas, and thus, because of her potentially outspoken views, and there really has not been evidence proven in a court of law or shown or filed yet from the government as to this, but that he and his wife were maybe espousing some allegations about Hamas and criticizing Israel for the war over there. He has 3 children, and basically as he was walking into his house a couple days ago, he was arrested by hooded ICE agents or Department of Homeland Security agents who wore masks. They grabbed him. He was able to say goodbye to his wife as she handed over his passport to these agents, and then he was brought to this facility. So there's certainly more to come on this. This is very similar to the cases that we've seen all across the country so far of people who are here on visas who have been outspoken about the U.S.'s handling and Israel's handling of the war in Gaza and Israel, and we'll be certainly keep you posted on what further developments happen and whether a judge gets involved at some point today or tomorrow to potentially try to block this release, as we saw in the case of Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia student in New York.
Yeah, the president and Secretary of State Marco Rubio have both said to expect more arrests like this. Finally, Jake, yesterday a federal judge declined to block the Department of Government Efficiency's efforts to take over the U.S. Institute for Peace amid some legal challenges. What more can you tell us about that?
Right, there was an emergency hearing yesterday after late last week and over the weekend. DOGE officials we worked with law enforcement and the FBI and Metropolitan Police here in Washington to go into this U.S. Institute of Peace, which is a peace building and peacekeeping organization that is handled and run by the U.S. government. The board of that organization can be appointed by the president, and in a differentiator from the other legal cases in which we've seen this takeover, the judge ruled that there were issues with the way that this case was handled in terms of who actually was the defendant and what the President Trump's power to either disband or reorganize the group is. She said that DOGE's handling was completely inappropriate. However, she decided to not block their access to the building for now. So we've seen, again, another government institution, government agency take over by Elon Musk and his allies in DOGE. Again, certainly more to come on this front, too, as these other independent agencies, maybe more on the fringe, not necessarily cabinet administration, cabinet level buildings have been taken over.
Jake Rosen, I know you're going to be keeping an eye on that for us. Thank you so much. All right, new evidence in the murder trial of the man accused of murdering the University of Idaho students. What prosecutors found and the suspect's selfie that could provide an essential clue. You're watching CBS News 24/7. New court documents reveal more of what may have happened the night 4 University of Idaho students were stabbed to death in 2022. Prosecutors say they have evidence a suspect bought a knife online before the killings. Now, according to that court filing, they also want the jury to see a very specific selfie. CBS News national correspondent Jonathan Vigliotti is following the case for us.
Prosecutors plan to introduce this selfie of Brian Kohberger. In court documents, they say it was taken on his phone about 6 hours after the murders of 4 University of Idaho students in 2022.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night and she not waking up. Okay. Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night.
Prosecutors say a surviving housemate described seeing a man with bushy eyebrows inside the home the night of the murders, and the jury will need to decide if Kohberger matches that description.
All rise.
Kohberger's defense has argued that the witness's description is unreliable and could prejudice the jury. Kohberger is accused in the stabbing deaths of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mosion, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin in their off-campus house. In another set of new documents, prosecutors allege Kohberger's Amazon account shows he purchased a K-bar knife and sheath months before the murders. The knife was never recovered, but investigators found a knife sheath similar to this image from Amazon at the crime scene. Prosecutors also presented this map illustrating the locations where Kohberger's car was allegedly seen nearby on surveillance video the night of the murders.
I'm going to enter not guilty pleas.
The judge entered not guilty pleas on Kohberger's behalf. A trial date is set for August. I'm Jonathan Vigliotti.
And we will get an update today on the investigation into the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore almost a year ago, where a cargo ship lost power and crashed into that bridge, causing it to fall into the water. As you can see there, 6 construction workers died that day. The National Transportation Safety Board will give an update at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Meanwhile, thousands of people in the Midwest are starting the first day of spring cleaning up from severe weather. A string of storms caused quite a bit of damage in Indiana and left thousands of customers without power. Heavy winds and hail knocked down roofs and power lines in neighborhoods about an hour south of Indianapolis. Now, moving north to the Illinois-Chicago state line, residents of the city of Gary are now picking up the pieces of a beloved school trashed by those gusts. CBS News Chicago's Darius Johnson shows us what the damage looks like today.
I'm Darius Johnson in Gary, Indiana, after storms tore through this area last night. And right now, there are still thousands without power. Take a look at this video so you can see the extent of the damage left behind. You can see that there are street lights, power poles, and even trees that are toppled over, some of them even snapped in half. The damage so extensive, it's even impacting homes. You can see where some of the roofing has even been torn off, and then at one home, the front of the facade has been damage. You can see that is going to be some work for those who are living inside that home. As you continue to look in this area and in this neighborhood, you can see where fences have been torn apart. There's even a garage that has completely been left mangled. Throughout the neighborhood, you can still see power lines and debris scattered along the street. Right around the corner from here, the damage at McCullough Academy is extensive. Take a look. From outside, you can see the roof is partially ripped off, and pieces of aluminum are hanging off the side of the building. More than 500 students go to this school, and the superintendent says if this storm had come through 2 hours earlier, students would have still been inside. Only a handful of staff was at the time. Thankfully, there are no injuries, but this storm has left damage to the gymnasium and classrooms, which is why classes are canceled for the rest of the week to give them time to assess the damage and figure out what's next. Now, when you just take a look at the extent of the damage left behind, it's clear that something went through here, either a powerful storm or a tornado. None of that has been confirmed yet by the National Weather Service. However, we know they will be out at some point today to assess the damage and try to take things from there. For now, I'm Darius Johnson in Gary, Indiana, CBS News.
So much of the country just cannot get a break from this severe weather. I want to bring you in because this wildfire burning in Texas right now, hundreds of people are under evacuation orders in and around in San Jacinto County. And firefighters say they just need to get a handle on this wildfire. 2,000 acres still smoldering, conditions and high winds fueling this fire, Zoe. So is this rough weather? Is it moving out? Are firefighters going to get a break at least?
Through Saturday, they're going to be seeing these dry and windy conditions. Okay. So unfortunately, not much of a break from the fire weather, but the severe weather that we were talking about, it is officially moved out. So there's a little bit of good news, but I want to talk about the fire threat first, because that is what all eyes are on across the central parts of the country with some very windy conditions. These were our top wind gusts yesterday, 85 plus miles an hour across parts of New Mexico, 75 plus across parts of Oklahoma, up to Kansas and Nebraska. And again, we are going to continue to see wildfire threats, especially across places that are in the most severe drought. These exceptional to extreme levels of drought across parts of Texas and New Mexico. You notice those are the exact areas that there are the highest risks for fire danger. There's that level 2, that exceptional risk for fire danger, or enhanced, I should say, and it is going to continue again across New Mexico and Texas. But then also look at Florida all the way down there. They are also, let's take this off really quick and show you the drought that they're on, under that moderate level of drought. So with very dry conditions in place, windy conditions as well, they are also dealing with fire danger. And I believe there might actually be a wildfire currently taking place. But right now I want to break down the exact details on that fire danger and that wildfire threat, because again, it's New Mexico, eastern New Mexico, and over to parts of Texas, and then all the way over to Florida. It's the easternmost parts of Florida that are going to be dealing with these dry and windy conditions. And a lot of Florida is not used to these dry and windy conditions. So any spark today that does spark across parts of Texas, New Mexico, and even all the way up into the northern Great Plains, it will spread very, very quickly. So no outdoor burning. If you smoke cigarettes, do not throw it out the window on a day like today, because places in Florida, again, you're not used to these very dry conditions. So even something as simple as mowing your lawn, if you start it up and it creates a spark, that could potentially start a wildfire. 85% of wildfires are started by humans. So you don't want to be that person that starts a wildfire today, because if anything, again, does spark, it's not going to take a lot for that to spread. As these very dry and windy conditions, again, continue to move across the country, Florida is going to be seeing those gusty winds throughout today and into tomorrow. But we are going to be seeing a bit more moisture heading their way by the end of the weekend and into early next week. So that is good news for Florida. And across the central parts of the country, Saturday is likely the last day that these fire conditions will stick around. Back to you.
Zoe, thank you. All right, let's take you to Oklahoma now, where we just learned the state executed a convicted murderer. The lethal injection of Wendell Grissom happened earlier this morning. It's the state's first execution of the year. Grissom held a woman 20 years ago in a home invasion robbery. His lawyers argued the death penalty should not apply to him because of developmental issues and head injuries before the crime. All right, let's take you over to Minnesota now, where a state Senate Republican just resigned. This after 40-year-old Senator Justin Eichhorn was charged with allegedly soliciting sex from a minor. Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Chanel Call for more on this story. Chanel, can you break down this case for us?
Yeah, so we've been following this story all day, Liz, and can now confirm that Minnesota Republican State Senator Justin Eichhorn has resigned. Now, this happened in the wake of some pretty damning allegations coming from federal prosecutors. And there was also, Liz, growing pressure from lawmakers really on both sides of the aisle here. Now, just to recap for our viewers, federal prosecutors say Eichhorn began messaging someone who he thought was 17 years old on March 11th. As it turned out, he was actually communicating with an undercover officer. Now, during those conversations, an undercover officer had multiple times said this purported girl was 17 years old. Despite that, this conversation continued, and Eichhorn allegedly asked for several photos. How did this happen? Well, prosecutors say Eichhorn answered an online ad that was part of a bigger and broader operation that targets sex trafficking. On Monday, authorities say that he was supposed to meet up with that alleged teenager, and that's when he was charged with attempted coercion or enticement of a minor. On Tuesday, Liz, he was booked into jail, and he's now being held there without bail. But of course, that is what fueled this fallout at the state capitol. Last night, we heard from Senate GOP leader Mark Johnson, and he had said that, look, we're not going to wait for Eichhorn to resign. Instead, I'm going to be putting forth a motion to remove him before that happens. Now, that session was slated to kick off at noon today, but before that happened, just a few minutes before that happened, we got word into our newsroom that Eichhorn had resigned.
And Chanel, you're keeping an eye on another big story, the Taliban releasing a Delta Airlines mechanic who was detained by Taliban authorities for more than 2 years. What are the details in this story?
Right, so Liz, the State Department is saying George Glassman, who was held by the Taliban for more than 2 years, has now been released. This is someone who the government says was abducted by the Taliban back in December of 2022. He was there as a tourist visiting the country and was just released today as a result of this new deal brokered by the U.S. and Qatar. Glassman is now, we should mention, the third American detainee to be released by the Taliban since January. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio put out a statement this morning. I'll read you part of it. It says, George joins Americans Ryan Corbett and William McKenty, who were released from Afghanistan on the night of President Trump's inauguration and then returned home to their families. It goes on to say, George's release is a positive and constructive step. It's also a reminder that other Americans are still detained in Afghanistan, and President Trump will continue his tireless work to free all Americans unjustly detained around the world. Now, important to note as well that the last two Americans who we just mentioned, those detainees who were released earlier this year, that had happened during the Biden administration, that negotiation, I should say, and it also involved an exchange for someone named Khan Mohammed. This is someone who was sentenced to 2 life terms after being convicted under U.S. narco-terrorism laws. And so I'm saying that to explain that George Glesman, who was just released today, in this particular deal, the U.S. did not have to give up a prisoner. So that's important to note because state officials are saying this was seen as sort of a goodwill gesture as the Taliban is now trying to, quote, normalize relations between the U.S. and Afghanistan.
All right, CBS News correspondent Chanel Call, thank you so much for that update. All right, we are following some breaking news, this time out of Philadelphia. Our colleague is covering a breaking story of a police officer shot near that city. Let's send it to our colleagues right now.
And gunshot wounds. So they will immediately attend to this individual, make sure everything else is okay. The bullet was stopped by the vest, but there could be perhaps some other more minor injuries. We are told there are no serious injuries suffered by this police officer who was shot this afternoon. And we are now told that the officer is a male. The suspect is also a male. The suspect is shot. We don't know that person's condition. The police officer, fortunately wearing that life-saving bulletproof vest, is a male police officer, Philadelphia Police Department, and being looked at now at Temple Hospital, where a media staging area is being set up, where Mayor Parker will be up there and others involved with this situation who will hopefully be able to unwrap for us what happened here today, midday, Friends Hospital off the boulevard. The boulevard, as you know, is a very busy, congested main highway up there in northeast Philadelphia. There you can see the map. It's near that big bend, Adams Avenue and the boulevard. Friends Hospital off to the side. We're told the shooting happened on the campus of Friends Hospital. So hopefully there were not other, because there's so much traffic there on the boulevard, had there been a shooting on the boulevard, clearly other motorists potentially in danger. That seems to not be the situation. This happened on the campus. Now, the campus, clearly, people work there, people are patients there, so hopefully no one else was injured in this. At this point, the information we are getting, we have 2 people shot. One, a male police officer shot in the bulletproof vest who is okay, being attended to at Temple Hospital. The other shot person is a male. We do not know that person's condition, the suspect. So at this point, we are being told we have 2 shooting victims. We can see there the police vehicle that the officer was in, that our helicopter, Chopper 3, is providing details. So as we continue to gather information for you,
our colleagues there at CBS News Philadelphia covering this breaking news. A police officer shot in the northeast part of that city. That officer was wearing a bulletproof vest and he was taken to the hospital. We're also told that another man was shot in that altercation. That man possibly a suspect, and we still don't know the condition of that individual. Meanwhile, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle return to their districts only to face the ire of their constituents. We'll take you inside some of these contentious town hall meetings across the country. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at the devastation going on right now in Gaza. A 1-month-old baby girl pulled from the rubble. Israeli airstrikes killed at least 58 Palestinians across the Strip overnight as Israel reignited its ground operations, retaking part of the corridor that divides the northern and southern parts of the Strip there. The defense minister says the fighting would only intensify until Hamas frees its hostages and gives up control of that territory. Now, here's the White House's response to that, saying, quote, Hamas could have released hostages to extend the ceasefire, but instead chose war. These terrorists bear total responsibility for this conflict. Every death would have and could have been avoided if Hamas accepted last week's bridge proposal offered by the U.S. Special Envoy. Remy Inocencio reports on the 3rd night of attacks since that ceasefire was broken.
Yes, Israel's military threatened to unleash hell on Gaza this week, and it is now delivering. At least 58 people were killed in a third night in a row of airstrikes up and down the Strip, taking the death toll to roughly an estimated 500 people since the ceasefire was shattered on Tuesday with Israel's shock pre-dawn missile barrages. Early morning reports came in today of more airstrikes near southern Khan Yunis and Rafah, which is on Egypt's border. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has warned Gaza to return the hostages and expel Hamas, the alternative being total destruction and devastation. However, collective punishment is a violation of the Geneva Conventions and deemed a war crime. In reaction to Israel's renewed bombing of Gaza, Houthi militants in Yemen claimed that they fired a hypersonic missile at Israel before dawn this morning. We here in Tel Aviv were jolted awake at about 4 a.m. This was the second Houthi missile directed here in 3 days, and this new attempt targeted Ben Gurion International Airport just south of Tel Aviv. The Houthis also claim that they targeted the USS Harry Truman aircraft carrier strike group right now in the Red Sea. Also overnight, the U.S. struck targets in Yemen's capital of Sana'a. That's according to Houthi-run TV. At least 9 women and children were wounded in one residential neighborhood. That's according to the Houthi-run health ministry. U.S. Central Command says operations are still continuing 24/7 after the Houthis started to target Israeli ships in the Red Sea. Back to you.
And we are following breaking news out of that part of the country. Israel's military says air raid sirens are sounding in central Jerusalem after a launch from Yemen. We're going to be keeping on top of this developing story. Meanwhile, back here in the U.S., Congress might be out of session this week, but lawmakers are facing the heat from voters reacting to deep cuts by the Department of Government Efficiency. Democrats and Republicans back in their districts, hearing from folks who put them into power, and they are getting an earful. Wyoming GOP Congresswoman Harriet Hagman became the latest lawmaker to confront a very hostile crowd. Take a listen to the scene inside her town hall last night.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, not a friendly crowd there. Let's get to CBS News Congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns. Caitlin, thank you so much for being with us. These are equal opportunity hot seats we're seeing here, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, right? Tell us what you're seeing.
That's right. This is kind of the time of the year where Congress is on recess. They're going back to their districts and their states, and they're hearing from their constituents, kind of trying to get a finger on the pulse of what they are thinking about how this administration is going. So we've seen at Republican town halls across the country some pushback, real pushback about what DOGE is doing in terms of the cuts. Now, I'll mention that in that district that Harriet Hagman represents, of course, she's an at-large district in Wyoming. This is a more liberal area where she was having this town hall in Laramie. It's a college town, so it's not exactly the conservative, makeup of the rest of the state. So take that with what you will, but it doesn't negate the fact that this is a time that lawmakers are hearing from their constituents. We've seen other deeply Republican districts have town halls with members who were getting a lot of pushback from constituents about what DOGE is doing, so much so that Republican leaders on Capitol Hill were discouraging members from holding town halls at all because they were arguing, in their words, that they were being infiltrated by Democrats. And so you have that situation on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, you're also seeing a lot of pushback at town halls because Democrats, at least in the party base, are really pushing against the establishment lawmakers on Capitol Hill, arguing that they're not doing enough to fight back against the Trump administration and against Republicans in Congress. So you have two different dynamics here, but the overall, takeaway is that this is a time that we are hearing from people across the country registering how they are feeling about what this administration is doing so far.
And Caitlin, whether it's a town hall or the digital town square, there's reporting today that some youth groups are getting more vocal, telling Chuck Schumer to step down or step up. Any indication from Chuck Schumer's office on how he's going to respond to this?
Well, right now, the strategy from Schumer has been to go out there and defend the decision that he made to move forward with that government funding bill last week. His argument is that he didn't have a choice, that Democrats didn't have any good choices. It was between shutting down the government or holding the line, shutting down the government, holding the line, and just moving forward and getting this over with, avoiding a shutdown. So he essentially argued that he chose the lesser of the two evils, in his words. Now, Democrats are very, very divided on how to move forward in a Trump administration, how to exert what little leverage they have being in the minority in Congress. And so you are seeing factions of the party revolt against Schumer, not only on the House side, but we've heard from Democrats on the Senate side as well, arguing that he gave away too much without any extractions in return. So we're seeing Democrats kind of go out around the country this week. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders are traveling together, hosting events that we'll see kind of what kind of pressure that puts on the party. But basically, bottom line is this is a party divided about how to move forward and how to exert influence in a time where they don't really have that much.
Caitlin Hugh-Burns, thank you so much for being on our show. Up next, trouble in Antarctica. A group of scientists asking for help after they say someone on their team assaulted a colleague. Ian Lee has an update when we come back. You're watching CBS News 24/7. The last person known to have seen missing University of Pittsburgh student Sudiksha Kunani is back on American soil this morning. A judge allowed Joshua Ribe to leave the Dominican Republic, declaring he's a witness, not a suspect in this case. Manuel Bajorquez is in Punta Cana with the very latest.
The 22-year-old Joshua Ribe and his father flew from Santo Domingo here in the Dominican Republic to San Juan, Puerto Rico last night after he was cleared to leave by a judge. This all, of course, relates to March 6th when he was the last person seen with Sudiksha Kunani, the missing college student from the University of Pittsburgh, along these waters behind me. He told investigators that they were taken out to sea by a large wave, that he tried to save himself and her, that he got out of the water, became sick, and passed out on the beach, thinking that she had gotten out of the water, but not 100% sure. He had been, in a way, detained by police here for almost 2 weeks while they were investigating, interviewed several times over and over, and his attorneys argued to the judge that because he was not a suspect, that because he was a witness, that was an illegal. Judge sided with the Ribes in that case and basically allowed him to go home. There was a question of a passport that was confiscated by police, but it appears that the U.S. Embassy gave him an emergency passport, basically, to be able to head back home. Of course, the family of Sudiksha Kunani grieving this entire thing. They did mention in front of cameras a few days ago that they believe his story, that she accidentally drowned. And he said, Ribe said in court, that they thanked him for trying to save her and they gave him hugs. So just overall a tragedy. But now this young American, 22-year-old Joshua Ribe, is finally back on U.S. soil. Back to you.
Thank you, Manuel. Well, there is trouble brewing on an isolated research base in Antarctica. A group of South African scientists are asking for help, claiming that they are trapped at the base with a team member who they say physically assaulted a colleague. CBS News correspondent Ian Lee breaks it all down for us.
This story is like something out of a horror movie. A crisis has developed at South Africa's remote Sene 4 research base in Antarctica. It's about 2,500 miles from home. Last month, a member of the 9-person team sent an urgent email reporting a male researcher physically assaulted one colleague and threatened to kill another, and requested help. But this base is now cut off from the sea, and any evacuation flight could face winds exceeding 130 miles per hour and sub-zero temperatures. The team isn't scheduled to return to South Africa until mid-December. And yes, these researchers undergo psychological evaluations. Government officials say that the situation is under control and everyone is cooperating with specialists who are mediating the situation, and that the person in question has shown remorse. But this isn't the first time this has happened at the base. There have been several altercations in the past with at least 2 people evacuated during previous expeditions. And this has raised questions about the reliability of the tests used to screen people.
Our social media team has much more content like this on TikTok and Instagram, so please follow us at the handle CBS News. A list ranking the world's happiest country is out, why researchers say the U.S. is a bit more miserable. Let's take a live look now at a very rainy sky over Baltimore right now. Storm system making its way through, Zoe, and that sounds like this one's not going to be too bad.
No, it's luckily getting weaker and weaker as it moves across the country because, yeah, it brought some severe weather across parts of the Midwest. It brought some large hail. It brought 17 tornado warnings. No confirmed tornadoes yet. We still have National Weather Service surveyors going out and trying to figure out what the damage exactly is. You can see where that storm system blew through, and right now it is just a line of rain. It brought feet of snowfall, and I just want to show you some of the hail reports that we got, anywhere from 1.25 inches to 2 inches. If you kind of put that into perspective, it's anywhere from golf ball size to egg size hail. Ice falling out of the sky that size, that was definitely damaging. But again, this is what we are looking at right now. This line of showers, it is nothing too heavy, and it's really not going to lead to any sort of severe weather threat throughout this afternoon. Just the marginal risk for thunderstorms, not even a level 1 out of 5. There is going to be the chance for some gusty winds, though, over the Appalachians, maybe gust up to 55 miles an hour. That's likely going to be the biggest impact as this storm system continues to make its way across the country. Let's look up, though, kind of break down the timing and the details of the rest of this storm system as it quickly sweeps across the East Coast. Again, a little bit of snow on the back end of that system and a little bit of rain moving across North Carolina, Virginia, up towards Washington, D.C. this evening, and then heading up towards New York and the far northeast. But you'll notice on the back end of this system is a little bit of snow as we wake up early tomorrow morning. So places like New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, you might be dealing with some icy roadways early tomorrow morning with wetter conditions on the eastern, on the warmer edge of that system. But everyone will begin to see those colder conditions as that frontal boundary sweeps through. But then look at our conditions. 1:30 Friday, sunny skies and much drier air will be moving in. So again, it is a quick mover. It is not going to be super impactful once it pushes by later Friday afternoon. Snow accumulations could be up to 2 inches. Again, it's not going to be anything appreciable, but you're going to want to give yourself an extra couple of minutes on the road for any early morning commuting. Back to you.
All right, Zoe, thank you so much. Well, depending on where you live, sometimes it can be tough to snag a DMV appointment. We all know that. And in Florida, scalpers are actually taking advantage of this, grabbing up DMV appointments like concert tickets and then selling them off. I didn't know you could even do that. That's according to the Miami-Dade County tax collector. He says a network, there are multiple people doing this, of scalpers, have been hoarding free DMV appointments and then selling them for as much as $250. People waiting in one very long line at Miami DMV office were not too happy to hear about that.
Not a good idea at all. We've been waiting for hours.
Oh, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's totally wrong. Because we've got an institution that we have to respect. And if we pay for that, we're contributing to corruption.
I find that ridiculous, because it's not fair to people who don't know it. We can't make the appointments on the actual website.
There's actually a county ordinance in the works making it illegal to sell those DMV appointments. We'll see if that goes through. Well, if you're happy and you know it, you probably live in Finland. For the 8th year in a row, that country took the top spot in the annual rankings of the world's happiest countries. It's based on an Oxford University study from last year. Researchers asked folks in 143 countries to rank their happiness from 0 to 10. They considered everything from social support, health, generosity, and the absence of corruption. Interesting. And other Nordic countries were also ranked as the top 4 happiest, including Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden. The same ranking as the previous year. But they discovered some sad news for the U.S. America dropped to 24th place, its lowest level since the report was launched in 2012. Clearly they're not watching this show, right? Well, we've got much more ahead here on CBS News 24/7. President Trump expected to sign an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education. And the NTSB is also set to give an update on the investigation into the deadly Baltimore bridge collapse, the announcement that could have impacts far beyond Baltimore. Stay with us right here on CBS News 24/7.